with the ongoing ceasefire negotiations in the Middle East, it's blaringly obvious that Western media, the Department of War, Pete Hegseth, the Trump administration, all these people, they're not telling you something, and that right before the war even started, they never stood a chance. So let me explain how this is the case. Before I continue, I just want to say, I am not some IRGC shill. I'm not some secret Shia Muslim who's backing the regime or who's supporting the regime. I don't support the regime in Iran. I don't agree with them. I'm actually not a big fan of them. There's actually a lot of things I hate about them. And I am against a lot of the things they've done in Syria, backing Bashar al-Assad's government, and other crimes that they've committed. But when it comes to this situation in the Middle East currently, on the ground, they have so many more advantages. And we're going to get to it. So I'm not some shill, I'm not some agent, I'm just a guy calling it how it is. So either what I'm saying is common sense or it's profound, all right? And that's up to you to decide. So let's put our biases aside and let's talk about what's going on. Now, I just want to clarify something about the Americans. This is not Hollywood. This isn't an action movie. This isn't Call of Duty where the Americans always win, where they're the good guys, and they always win every battle, and they always pull through. This is real life. This is reality. And even the United States military can lose. Even the United States military can be on the wrong side of history. Even the US can launch an illegal war in Iran and fumble it. So the point is this. Just because they have the largest carrier fleet, actually the largest navy, just because they have the largest air force and the largest amount of tanks, this does not mean they win by default. Yes, they have overwhelming advantages in a lot of areas, but so does Iran. So let's get to them. Starting off with the advantages on the American side, first we have their naval fleet. So the United States operates 11 nuclear-powered carriers. You got the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt. So the point is, they have supremacy over the waves. They have a lot of sailors, and they have a lot of fighters, military hardware aboard these ships in their fleets to wage foreign campaigns. This is how they're also able to establish air dominance over Iran. And we had carriers in the Gulf, so they could launch fighters into Iran. And that brings me to the second advantage, and that is their air force. Their air force is currently, compared to Iran, they're unmatched. Like the Americans have total air dominance. I wouldn't say total, but they have a good amount of air authority in the air. There's some, like we saw, some planes got shot down. They lost AC-130s. They lost an A-10. They lost an F-15. So the point is, largely, 70% of the time, the Americans, that's just a guess, by the way. Don't take it as fact, but the Americans can still inflict lots of damage from the air onto the ground in Iran. So that's the air and the navy covered. And just to weigh this against Iran, Iran's navy is nothing to brag about. There's nothing to brag about. No one ever, when you talk about the Americans, you're like, oh, they got the biggest navy, they got one of the biggest armies, they got all these stealth fight. No one's saying this with Iran. No one's like, oh, have you guys seen their navy? Have you guys seen their air force is like, what, they have like F-14 Tomcats from when the Shah was in charge. So the Iran's navy and air force is nothing to brag about. So when Pete Hegseth comes up and he does this, the press briefing or whatever, and he says,
the math is clear. We're using 10% of the world's most powerful navy, and you have 0% of your navy. That's real control, and we have a long track record of dealing with pirates and terrorists.
Just remember, it's nothing to brag about. Their navy was never anything to brag about, just like the air force. And if I was an American taxpayer and I'm watching this war unfold, right, I would ask Mr. Pete Hegseth, I'd be like, sir, Mr. Secretary of War, have you achieved any real military objectives? And he's like, yeah, we destroyed their navy. We've taken out the air force, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, listen, Mr. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, have you found the uranium? Have you destroyed their missile factories? Have you destroyed their drone factories? Have you destabilized their government? Have the people risen up as your president promised? Has Iran actually been defeated? Is the Strait of Hormuz safe to pass through? I'd be asking the real questions, because they'll take these small victories when they shoot down Iranian fighters or they take out their navy, right? And they'll spin it, right? right? They'll spin it to make it look like a massive victory. They're acting like they just sank the Yamato or they just sank the Bismarck in World War II. So this is just ridiculous, all right? Their Navy and the Air Force are never anything to brag about. Another advantage the US has over Iran in this conflict is public perception and the media. So since 2001, Western-backed media and Hollywood have gone out of their way to demonize Muslims and Arabs and people from the East in general. So like when you play like games like Call of Duty or you watch like war movies from the time, the Russians are generally the bad guys. The Arabs are they're like the insurgents. They're the enemy. So they're the guys you're basically shooting at. So when you grow up with this indoctrination for like 20 years, you're naturally going to assume that these people don't have your best interests at heart. That they want to come and they want to destroy your way of life. That they want to kill you. But this could not be further from the truth. See, the Western-backed media has no interest in humanizing the enemy at all, even their civilians. So when they say they say death to America or death to Israel, and they want to kill all civilians. Look, just understand, they're from the Iranian point of view, when they chant this, they're not talking about civilians. Because killing civilians is wrong. It doesn't matter if they're in Tel Aviv or in Washington. You can't kill civilians. And I condemn anyone who would even think that, right? To do that. And Iran is also guilty of such crimes as well. What they did in Syria was tragic. They killed 100,000 Sunni Muslims, give or take. I don't know the actual number, but they've killed lots of them. The point is, there's no clean hands on each side. But the Iranians don't have like the global control over the media. They don't have all these outlets on their side that are pushing a counter narrative that the Americans do. All right. So this is my point. The point is the years of indoctrination, the high casualty incidents, the deaths of civilians, the propaganda talking points, the narrative spins, all these twists. They are being leveraged today in this conflict to not only manufacture consent for high casualty events and killing civilians potentially, but to also demonize the enemy so that the public will not sympathize with innocent people that are getting caught up in the crossfire. As far as I'm concerned, for the IRGC or the parliament, I could care less. But when it comes to civilians, it doesn't matter where they're from. We all, collectively, as humans, need to understand that this is a tragedy. When they hit that school with the Tomahawk missile, it doesn't matter if they were Iranians or if they were It doesn't matter where they're from. 100+ innocent children lost their life, and we should all condemn it equally. And we should hold the Americans accountable for this, just like we should hold the Iranians accountable for their crimes. So this has to be made apparent. So now coming on to Iran's advantages in the war. First of all, is geography, right? So they have the Zagros and Alborz mountains. The whole country essentially is like a mountainous terrain. It's hard to traverse, harsh climate. It's not the most suitable for a ground invasion. A ground invasion could happen, but it would be costly and it would take a lot of resources. And they also have this wide access to the sea. And they're using their sea access to mine the strait, to create atmospheres of uncertainty with the tankers that are there. So that's why the strait is able to be locked down by them, because they have the capability to enforce that lockdown using drones and missiles. And they're also using mines, as I've said before. But that being said, geography is one of their strongest advantages in this conflict. Another advantage they have is economic leverage. So the Strait of Hormuz, this is where 20% of the world's oil is exported. And countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, the UAE, they all do business and trade through this strait. So when the attack began, not only did they lock down the Strait of Hormuz, trapping all the tankers in, they essentially held the world's oil, 20% of the world's oil supply, hostage. And what this basically means is that the Iranians have the ability to cause extensive economic damage across the world. Because we saw how when their oil facilities were hit, what did they do? Well, they targeted facilities in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Oman, in Saudi. And since we saw how the Strait of Hormuz was locked down, these companies, the Saudi Aramco and all these other energy providers or energy oil exporters, whatever, we saw how they had to shut down production of oil because there's no excess storage. There's no excess storage, and we saw how the cascading effect this had across the planet. Like diesel now is like $3. Like a full tank of these, like $300 here in Australia anyway. So they have demonstrated the ability to cause economic damage. Now, closing the strait does mean it hurts Iran too. So in the long run, it wouldn't be wise to close it indefinitely. And we saw how they were letting, Russian, Chinese ships pass through their own ships. They were actually making money. It's actually pretty funny because this caused such a strain on the global energy market. Sorry. The Americans are like, okay, we're gonna temporarily lift the sanctions off Russian oil or Russian gas, and we're gonna do the same to Iran. So, so you saw how much damage it did to the world economy that your enemies had to temporarily unsanction your oil, so that Europe could survive, because Europe depends on American and Middle Eastern oil, because they're not trading with Russian oil anymore, or a way smaller extent. The point is, we all saw the damage that Iran did when they shut down the strait and they started targeting energy infrastructure across the region. And they have actually, this leads to the next advantage. They have so much drones and ballistic missiles. When they responded with their opening volley of attacks, this was their older equipment. This is with their older stuff from 2014, 2015. Only later in the war were they starting to use their newer missiles. And we saw eventually they deployed Khorramshahr missiles over Israel. We saw those cluster munitions being deployed. So they have an extensive arsenal of missiles and drones that they're manufacturing in-house, by the way. And they cannot be all shot down. A Shahed 136 drone costs $50,000, and some other drones cost $15,000. So they can manufacture these munitions cheaply. And when they're launching these at the Iron Dome or whatever, and they're getting intercepted, some of these interceptor missiles cost like $1.4 million. There's actually a funny clip going around, a viral clip where one missile is going through air defenses. 14 interceptors were launched to try and take it down. So Iran has the capability to overwhelm air defenses, and even if their targets are intercepted, or even if their munitions are intercepted, it's still costing the enemy lots of money, because you weigh $50,000 drone to a $1.4 million interceptor missile on a long enough time span, it's going to cause strain on the economy. And we saw how when they were hitting these THAAD batteries, there's 8 THAAD batteries in the world. Iran took out 4 of them. They had to start moving assets around. They had to start moving stuff from South Korea and other theaters. And so you see that this is why I said it's not like Hollywood. America is not invincible. They are not the world's hegemon, not anymore, or at least not to the extent they used to be. So that is insane, that the Iranians have the capability to do this. And the media will not tell you like this, because then it legitimizes the threat. The media will always try and downplay and downgrade the threat to where they always have the upper hand. This is why you see Pete Hegseth talking about the Navy and the Air Force that they've obliterated, right? Because they need a victory. They need something to brag about. So the public can be like, this is everything's going well. Diesel's $4 here, but yeah, everything's going well. So anyway, on to the next one. The next thing they got is asymmetric warfare doctrine. So essentially, before wartime occurs, commanders and leadership are trained on how to operate independently of one another in the event that they cannot communicate with each other. So let's just say commanders in Khorasan, that region, they have their preset instructions. They already have lists of targets. They already have operations that they're ready to carry out. And then someone in the south, someone like near Isfahan, for example, commanders there, they have their own separate list. So it's not that they're all operating independently of each other. It's that if command or leadership goes down, then the Iranian military, the IRGC, are trained to operate independently of the central command apparatus. This is why we are seeing constant missile strikes, even though Iran was getting carpet bombed and Tehran was getting hit, because these commanders are trained. And this leads actually into my next point, which is the underground infrastructure of Iran. So you've heard the term missile city. Well, let me tell you, these are like manufacturing hubs for drones and missiles. This is where Iran will manufacture their stuff. They're deep underground, buried under the mountains, reinforced with ultra high performance concrete. They are nigh impossible to get to. And the infrastructure comes in is there's tunnels all under the country. So let's just say a missile carrier starts. This is point A. Oops, I hit the mic. Sorry. This is point A. The missile carrier is going to travel in these tunnels across the country to point B. It's going to fire its payload. It's going to launch the payload, and the payload's gone. It's going to return back into the tunnel and travel elsewhere to either get rearmed or to fire separate payloads elsewhere. Because how they do it is there's thousands of launch sites. There's thousands of different areas they can launch from. And I've even seen videos where it's a desert, right? It's flat ground. The ground explodes. There's primary detonations on the ground. And then what happens is a missile then comes out of that explosion. So these missile sites are buried underneath the soil, blasted open, and then the missiles launch anyway. So how you can't detect a lot of these sites. It's like, you know that game at the arcade where like the head comes up and you got to hit it with the hammer? That's basically the US Air Force. They're trying to find a lot of these missile launches when they're coming out of the tunnels, but they can't because they keep repositioning. They fire one, boom, they reposition to the north. Then they do it again and again. So this is why their infrastructure is so insane. This is why the tunnel networks are so effective, because they're all connected. They're all connected to the missile cities. So, and you see in those propaganda videos that they release, they got storage bunkers. They got storage depots of hundreds of thousands of munitions. And even according to Professor Mohammed Mirandi of the University of Tehran, when he was asked about how much of the munitions do they have left, he said they have the vast majority of the munitions left. And that's like the advanced stuff as well. That's the advanced stuff. And I'm inclined to believe his opinion, because I don't know how the Americans or the Israelis are going to bomb, how they're going to get to all these places when there's separate launch sites, separate storage areas. The commanders and the leadership are all operating semi-autonomously. So it's like nearly impossible to actually decapitate this regime and take them down without a comprehensive ground invasion. The next major advantage they have over the US military is that they have lines of succession. So Khomeini, when they killed him, he had an heir. Then his heir probably has an heir. And this is across the board with all of them. I actually talked about this in my previous video. So the idea is a general is killed. His number two becomes the number one. And there's like, this goes down layer by layer by layer. So even if dozens of Iranian leadership are taken out, people are already ready to fill in their place and continue the fight. This also goes into the asymmetric warfare doctrine, because their lines of succession are facilitating the fighting continues from the Iranian front. So that is another key thing about this conflict. The last thing that they have over the United States is something called martyrdom culture. In the history of Islam, sometime after the Prophet's death, there was a battle that occurred at Karbala. It's called the Battle of Karbala, actually. And this is where the Prophet's grandson, Hussein ibn Ali, was martyred and killed, peace be upon all of them. So essentially, what the government is doing, and the population, because this is a historical event involving their religion, they are drawing parallels between the martyrdom of Hussein and the ongoing martyrdom of countless Iranians today. So essentially, because they revere figures like Ali and Hussein and Hassan and the Prophet Muhammad, of course, peace be upon all of them, the idea is they view themselves following in their footsteps by being the underdog. Because even in Islamic history, we'll take the Battle of Badr, for example, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, there was only 300 of them. And they faced an army of 10,000 and they won. So essentially what's going on here is they are following in their footsteps. So they view themselves as on the right path. And they're viewing themselves as on a righteous path. So when, an IRGC, a platoon of them is killed, they're viewed as martyrs. The eternal reward is waiting for them. Like, this is the ending. And another thing is, they launched, the United States and Israel launched this attack during, Ramadan. So you have a bunch of principled, disciplined Iranians who have strong conviction in their religion, and they are seeing their country and their people getting slaughtered, just as the Prophet and his companions saw his people getting killed and persecuted in his time. They're viewing themselves as the modern day approximation of what's going on. Not that they are equal, not that they see themselves as equal
to these historical figures. But the fact is that they're walking down the same path. So when they die in battle, they're happy. They this is something they pray for. Because to die a martyr in Islam is very noble and praiseworthy. It's guaranteed paradise in Islam. So you have a bunch of these people, and they're fighting an enemy that is attacking them. Their zeal, their conviction is near unbreakable. And this is why, if a ground invasion occurs, this is why if the United States launches a comprehensive ground invasion, it would be a nightmare. It would be worse than Vietnam, worse than Iraq. It would be worse than any conflict that they did before, because of all the advantages I just listed and the people that they're fighting. You cannot beat an enemy that is afraid to die. You will never beat an enemy that is afraid to die, because if you kill them, in their eyes, they win. If they kill you, they have defeated you and they win anyway. It's a zero-sum game. And it is the wisest move of the Trump administration and the United States military is to avoid a ground invasion. It doesn't matter if it's a Khartoum Island. It doesn't matter if it's mainland Iran. To do that would put all these US servicemen at risk. Not only that, you're putting populations in the Gulf states at risk, because Iran says, Iran did say, after Trump threatened to take out desalination plants, that they will take out Gulf desalination plants. This ties back into the economic leverage. They will plunge the entire region into chaos. Because Iran is fighting a war of an existential nature. This is the war for their country. For the US and the US taxpayer, this was a war of choice. So, even if they lose, it's an international embarrassment, but the United States lives on. If Iran loses, they lose everything, and their people will suffer as a result. So if they actually launch a ground invasion, or they hit desalination plants, or they escalate the war in another way, they will turn this region to darkness. They will bomb more energy infrastructure. They will bomb desalination plants. They will bomb Israel. They will do everything in their power to annihilate the Middle East, because the Gulf states have a lot of investments in the United States. Not only do they have economic leverage, not only do the Iranians have economic leverage, but they have political leverage, because the United States has just proven that they cannot protect the Gulf states, as we saw their bases getting hit. We saw their countries getting hit. We saw hotels getting hit. And the US couldn't stop it. They couldn't stop it. They hit $1 billion radar system in Qatar, I believe. So if they've proven that the Americans can't protect them, and they have they have all these investments. They have over $1 trillion of investments in the United States in AI, data centers, all that research. What's going to happen if they plunge the entire world in the Middle East into darkness? What are they going to do? They're going to pull their investments out. They're going to give the middle finger to Jared Kushner, and they're going to say, we're going to go to China. You're not going to protect us. We're going to go to China instead. So this is why a ground invasion or a US victory, it's unlikely, but it could happen, but it would be so costly, it would still look like a defeat anyway. So that's all my points I'm saying. And whether you agree or you disagree, that's fine. Let's talk about it in the comments section, and let's be respectful, of course. But that is why the United States never stood a chance against Iran in this conflict. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. And like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you later.